video is the first in my series that I'm calling the 12 Cookies of Christmas 2023, where I explore the Christmas cookies of 12 different European countries. I will be releasing one video every day from December 1st through December 12th, so make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of those videos. Today's cookie is a special one as I'm starting off the series with Danish honey hearts or Honninghjerter. These are the Danish version of gingerbread, and they're made with a dough that is fermented for an entire month before baking. So join me today as I share with you how to make these special cookies, as well as tell you about some interesting raising agents that are used in the recipe. And I'll also be sharing with you some of the history of this type of gingerbread. And make sure to stick to the very end where I will give you a sneak peek of tomorrow's video. Let's get started. This recipe begins a month before you plan to bake these. Though you can do this a minimum of 2 weeks before, just know that the flavor may not be quite the same with the shorter fermentation time. You're going to put 250 grams or about 2 cups of all-purpose flour into a bowl with 250 grams or 3/4 of a cup of warm honey and stir that together until you have a smooth dough. Then you're going to let this ferment for a month. The practice of fermenting honey and flour to make gingerbread goes back to the Middle Ages. Gingerbread makers often began making their batches of gingerbread for Christmas time in August. So if you have time, you can try the longer fermentation time if you'd prefer. The history of Danish gingerbread, as it is enjoyed today, began towards the end of the 18th century in a town called Christiansfeld. Many Germans settled in this town, bringing their tradition of Nürnberger Lebkuchen with them, particularly a man named Manuel Martin Achnich, whose wife ran a bakery that later earned the town the name the Gingerbread Town. Her style of gingerbread spread throughout all of Denmark, but you can actually still visit the bakery today. I will put the name of the bakery on the screen. I'm pretty good with languages, but pronouncing Danish might be my Achilles heel. The gingerbread made famous by this bakery is both the honey hearts that I'm showing you today, as well as a sliceable gingerbread cake. After mixing the dough, I stored mine in a covered container lined with parchment paper. I've heard that some people have trouble with their dough becoming rock hard, so I put the parchment at the bottom just in case so I could ensure that I could get it out of the container. I actually fermented mine for 2 months in a cupboard in my kitchen, and this is the consistency it was when I took it out. It was stiff but bendable. On the day you plan to bake, I found that grating the dough makes it easiest to combine with the rest of the ingredients. This was the consistency of the dough after it was grated, and I decided to mix everything together by hand instead of using my stand mixer, just because I have a very large stand mixer and it doesn't really handle small batches of things very well. Now you're going to add 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, a 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, a 1/2 teaspoon of ground star anise, 1/2 teaspoon ground cloves, 1/2 teaspoon allspice, and then the zest of 1 orange. Then you're going to be using 2 old-style raising agents that were precursors to baking soda and baking powder, and these are called potash and hartshorn salt. Potash is potassium carbonate and literally means pot ash, which is made by leaching water through wood ashes and then evaporating it. The result was a crude potassium carbonate mixture. Later on, a more refined version was developed called pearl ash, and that's what I have here. I was able to buy this German brand on Amazon, and I've linked it below. And the other one you're going to use is originally called hartshorn salt, but now it's called baker's ammonia, which is ammonium carbonate. This was originally made by grinding and heating deer antlers, and today's version, however, is made synthetically. I also bought this on Amazon and linked it below. Careful with this one though, it smells very strongly of ammonia, which does cook off during baking. but don't sniff the bottle or you'll be in for a surprise. This is actually what the Victorians used for smelling salts to revive someone who had fainted. To activate these, you're going to mix 1 teaspoon of baker's ammonia with 1 egg yolk and 1 teaspoon of potash with 2 tablespoons of cold water. Then add those both to the dough. I started out by mixing everything with a wooden spoon and then eventually switched to my hands. Then I transferred it to my work surface with a generous dusting of flour, as this is a very sticky dough. It was hard to get all of the fermented bits of dough to fully integrate with the rest of the ingredients, so I spent a lot of time kneading it and smearing it with the palm of my hand, which actually really helped incorporate everything. Then I rolled it out on a very well floured surface until it was 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters thick, and cut out medium-sized hearts, though I think larger hearts are a bit more traditional if you have a cookie cutter a bit bigger than this. I know I'm probably going to get some questions asking if you can substitute the baker's ammonia and potash for baking soda or baking powder, and the answer unfortunately is no. The two of those baking agents combined together create a very unique texture that you really can't recreate with baking soda, and they create almost like a spongy-like texture that you're going to see in the final product. And the holes throughout the dough, or I should say the bubbles throughout the dough, are very different than the bubbles created with baking soda. So hopefully you can find these two raising agents in the country that you live in via the internet. And if you're in the United States, I've linked the Amazon link below that you can find to purchase here in the US. Then place them on a parchment-lined baking sheet, spaced pretty far apart, and brush off any excess flour and bake them in a 350 Fahrenheit or 180 Celsius preheated oven for 10 to 12 minutes, or until pressing the cookie no longer leaves a permanent indentation and it springs back. Then cool them fully on a rack. And you'll see here the bubbles that I was talking about earlier. You can see these little tiny bubbles that are created from those rising agents, and it creates a spongy texture. And if you think about it, this is the texture of the inside of a deer antler. It looks like bone or a marrow in between bone. It's a little strange to think of it that way maybe, but it's interesting considering where the first hartshorn salt came from. Then you're going to store them for 3 to 4 days in a closed container with a very lightly damp towel inside of the container, and this is going to help soften the texture so that they're nice and soft for eating. Then you're going to melt 150 grams of dark chocolate and pour them over the cooled hearts, and then traditionally a glossy picture of St. Nicholas is added to the top. I couldn't find those traditional Danish glossy pictures, so I just used Christmas stickers with the backing still left on them, and then obviously remove these before eating. I'm looking forward to trying this. I'm so intrigued to know what a cookie tastes like that's been fermented. The dough has been fermented for a whole month. That is a flavor and texture that I thought I'd never be able to recreate here in the United States. I've had Lebkuchen in Germany, and this reminds me so much of the texture and the flavor of it. They're mildly sweet. You would expect the honey to be really, really sweet, but these are a very mildly sweet cookie. And you can taste those spices are very unique with the star anise in there. And then the chocolate adds this sweetness that you need to go along with that cookie that isn't very sweet. So they complement each other and create a really amazing flavor. And that texture is so interesting. It's like spongy and soft, and I don't know, you should try these, make these. These are so good, so interesting. I really like that. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the videos in this series. And if you're watching this video in the future, I will put the playlist at the end of the video so that you can catch up on any of the videos in this series that you may have missed. And I will see you tomorrow, but until then, here is a sneak peek of what's to come.